I hope you are doing good. Welcome to the 10th video in the series JavaScript problems for practice for SDE1s. So today we are going to implement a debouncing function. Debouncing and throttling is one of the most common interview questions that you expect for a front-end interview, especially if you are for SDE1 or fresher level. There are variations of debouncing that you can expect for the senior levels, which is SDE2 and SDE3, that will solve in the SDE2 series. Today I'm going to implement the basic debouncing function. If you see, it was also asked in Adobe's MTS2 interview on July 9, 2025, implement a debounce function. So from this you can analyze that how common this question has been asked. Coming back to the question, let me close the side drawer. If you read the problem statement, debouncing is a optimization technique in which we debounce a function that should be invoked only once after a specified delay. When do we use debounce is, for example, let's say if I go over here and if I type something, let's say coding. So when I finish typing, then only the API call should be made. When I'm typing each letter and if I'm making an API call on each of the letters, then that is an expensive operation. We don't want to do that. What we want is we want the user to finish typing, and only when the user has finished typing, then we want to invoke the function, and that too after a slight delay. So let's say we assume that user has stopped typing for 200 millisecond or 300 millisecond, which gives us a sense that user may have finished typing what the keyword he was looking to search for, and then we invoke the API call or the function call. Similarly, we can do the same thing on the button click. Let's say if someone is clicking the button multiple times, we want to invoke the function or the API call once the user has clicked the button and has paused or took some time in between. So that's how the debouncing works. So let me remove everything from here, from h1 to div, and let's have this button for the test. So button slash button, and this will be test button. And now here let me give it id will be test btn. Let me save this, reload. So we should have the test button over here. And now if I go to script, let me copy everything from here, from the sample to this button. Now we don't have the debounce implemented yet, so what I'm going to do is let's remove this debounce, let's remove this duration and see what happens. So let me save this, let me reload and open the console log. If I click on test, you see that the text is being printed or console logged here, Hola learners bucket. Every time I click, this is being logged. So let's assume that you are making an API call on the click of this, then it becomes an expensive operation. You are hitting the server every time the button is clicked, which we don't want. So what we want is we want to debounce the call. So how the debounce should work is, if I'm continuously clicking on tests, this function won't be invoked. It will be invoked when I have stopped clicking for the specified duration, which is 3000 millisecond or 3 milliseconds. So let's implement this debounce function. If you understand the way debounce work is, we have a delay. So delay is implemented through set timeout within the JavaScript, or you can use set interval. Now interval is used for repeated calls, but we don't want to do a repeated call. We want to do a single call. So that's why we will be using set timeout. So const debounce. Now what debounce takes as an input is a function. So if you see, this debounce takes this function as an input and the delay. So function and delay is the two arguments that this debounce function will take input. After this, it returns a function which gets invoked. So this debounce will take this function and it will return another function. So we are going to return a function from here. Now this function will pass all the arguments and its context to the input function. So let's say if I'm assigning the debounce to click event, so on the click of this, the event object should be accessible within this function. Like if I do e, and then here let's say if I do e dot prevent default, it should work. So that means the arguments and the context is passed from the return function to the input function. So let's do one thing. Let's get the context. So let's context equals to this is the special keyword which is available within the function, and depending upon how the function is being invoked. So we got the context of this function and then the arguments. So either you can have the arguments like this will also use the rest operator and collect all the arguments. Otherwise there is a special keyword available which is arguments. So these special keywords give you all the arguments that are being passed to this function as an array. And now we have to implement the delay call. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to implement a set timeout. So set timeout, and then this set timeout, what it will do is we'll just do function dot apply. We are using apply method. We'll pass the context and the arguments, which are array of arguments, and then the delay. Now in this current implementation, when we are using debounce, this will return this function. When this function is invoked, we'll see that the set timeout is being set and our function inside function is invoked after the specified delay. For example, let's say if I click, after 3 seconds you will see hola learners bucket being printed over here. So function is not defined. Sorry, this is fn. Let me clear this, reload, and now if I click on test, you will see that the hola learners bucket being printed after 3 seconds. But we don't, and let's say if I'm repeatedly clicking on this, then it will be queued and it will be printed multiple times. We don't want this. We want to be printed only once when the user has stopped clicking. So for that, what we are going to do is we are going to maintain the timer ID. So set timeout returns a timer ID which can be cleared. So I'm going to set timer ID as null by default, and every time the function is invoked, I'm going to clear the timer ID. And now this timer ID variable will hold the timer ID returned by set timeout. So what will happen is, let's say if a set timeout is running and if the function is invoked again, it will clear the previous timeout and set a new timeout. This way, the function will be invoked only once after the specified delay within the set timeout. It won't be invoked multiple times. This will clear the timer. So this is how you implement the debounce function. Now let me click on test. You'll see I'm clicking it continuously and nothing is happening. But if I stop, then after 3 seconds, hola learners bucket will be printed. If in between 3 seconds, if you click it again, then nothing will happen. For example, I've clicked, I've stopped, I've clicked, I've stopped, I've clicked, I've stopped. Nothing is happening. But if I wait after the final click for 3 seconds, it will be printed again. So this is how debouncing works. Now the current implementation, in this current implementation, how it works is, when I click on the test, the first call happens after the delay of 3 seconds. There is a variation of debounce which accepts the option of trailing and leading. So what happens in trailing, it works as a normal debounce where the first invocation call happens after the delay. But in the leading, the first call happens immediately and then the subsequent calls will happen after the delay. So that we'll see how to implement that in the SDE2 series. But now you have a good understanding of how debounce works. So this is how you can implement it. I'll see you in the next video where we will implement the throttle function.